That thing says Happy Halloween like a glue gun burn. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today for our little bit of Halloween goodness, I'm going to be tackling one of the most iconic Halloween looks, which is a skeleton. I've done a skeleton a couple times before for Halloween's past, and it's just a really fun, very classic costume to do. But this time I wanted to do something a little bit more elevated, and I was actually inspired by a look that Gucci did a few years ago. It just had like a rib cage that was completely encrusted in jewels. So that's kind of the inspiration for today's look. So let's talk about the supplies that we need. To complete this costume, you'll need a black base to attach your bones to. I chose to go with a black velvet dress. You will also need a few pieces of black craft felt, some white fabric to wrap your bones in, as well as some 1/2 inch batting. Last but certainly not least, you'll need a skeleton template to make your bones out of. So the most important part for a skeleton costume is the bones. So to start out, I did a quick search on Pinterest and just found a picture of a skeleton that I liked. And then I had that printed at my local print shop and just cut that out into these separate pieces. And this is what I used as my skeleton template to cut out the pieces of my craft felt and my batting. So once I had those cut out, I used a little bit of spray adhesive just to attach the batting to the pieces of felt that corresponded with it, just to give me these nice 3D bones. So now that I have all of the pieces with the 1/2 inch batting on the front and the felt on the back, we're ready to wrap these. And I'm just using a white satin to wrap these. You can use any white fabric that you would like. I just happen to have some white satin on hand. So I have already wrapped all the other bones except for these hips. So I'm gonna get y'all zoomed in and show you how to wrap these. Okay, to cover our bone pieces, we're gonna start with our fabric and we're gonna lay it with the right side of the fabric down. So this will be the wrong side of the fabric facing up, and then you're gonna lay your bone piece with the batting side down with this felt piece laying up. So this will be a little bit different for each piece that you pick, but we're gonna start by just tacking this in a couple different spots just to hold it in place. I'm gonna do the tops right here and then 2 little spots down here, and then we'll start going around the edge and hot gluing everything on. So I'm just gonna put down a couple beads of glue and put those on really quickly. Okay, so now that we have that tacked on in a couple of different spots, I'm just gonna use my shears to cut this fabric strategically in a way that's gonna allow me just to wrap the fabric over the edges and just glue them around the edge. We're not gonna worry about the inside pieces, like these hips have little spots right here that should be open. We're not gonna worry about that right now. What I wanna do first is attach all the fabric around the edges, and then we're gonna use an X-Acto knife to cut that, and then we're gonna wrap the fabric around to create the bone shape. So it's gonna be a solid piece of material that you're using. Just lay it on, no worries about the holes for the time being. I'm just gonna go around and glue everything to the edges. For this step, don't be afraid to cut up the fabric as much as you need to make it work for whatever piece you're working on. Now that this is wrapped and we have our solid hip bone, we're gonna flip this over, and then using an X-Acto knife in these spaces right here, we're just gonna cut very, very carefully, pretty much down the middle here. So I'm gonna start from basically one tip of this hole all the way down to the other. And then now that that is cut, we're going to use the hot glue to wrap this around, and that will give us the holes for the hips. So again, just like I glued the outside, I'm going to be cutting these and then gluing them with the hot glue on these edges. Okay, now all the bones are wrapped, so now I'm gonna add just a little bit more detail. So if you look at the template here, when you look at like the spine, there's these little black marks in between the different discs to give it some dimension. But when I covered this in white, it's just pure white. So I went through and just added very, very lightly some little lines to let me know where I should stitch these little separations between the discs. I will be using hand stitches just because we used batting to make this 3D. If I use hand stitches, I can pull it taut to give some like 3D dimension between each little disc here. And then I'm probably also going to draw a black line just with a regular Sharpie just to give it definition between each disc. So I've gone through and made marks on the spinal cord, and then I've also gone through and made a few little marks right here next to the sternum on the ribs. So I'm going to quickly sew those off camera, but I'm just gonna be using plain old simple hand stitches for those. The one tip that I will give you before I start on this is when you're making the marks, you wanna make sure for the ribs that this is curved in here. There's no straight lines for the skeleton. You want it to be organic, rounded lines. So these are all rounded in here, and then each line between the little discs is slightly rounded down to give the illusion of it being round. So when you're drawing those on, just make sure that you're being careful not to just make a straight line, because that'll look a little bit unusual. So I'm gonna stitch these really quickly and I'll be right back. All right, so now our bones are completely done. So I have put the little stitches here for the sternum and just colored it in with a Sharpie just to give it some definition. So now there's a very distinct difference between the sternum and the ribs. Same thing on the little spinal column. I just added the little discs, and again, I did hand stitching and then just traced over it with a Sharpie to give some definition. So now that all of our bones are done, it's time to add them to our base. Now I am going with a dress, and this is just a stretch velvet dress. I did make it, but it's very, very, very simple. It was from a very, very basic pattern. You definitely don't have to make your own base. I just chose to make my own because I'm picky about stuff like that. So this is the base that I made. So now I'm going to just pin all of these bones on in the place they look the best. Once they're all pinned, I will hand stitch them on, and then that is almost it. After that's done, we'll add on the crystals, and then this is gonna be completely finished, y'all. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pinning these bones. Okay, so now that all of our bones are pinned on, I'm gonna go ahead and hand tack this onto the dress, and then I'll be right back with you to put on those gems. All right, so all of our bones are fastened onto our dress. So now the last step, which you could stop here if you wanted to, but I'm gonna add a little bit of glitz to it. I have some costume jewelry that I ordered off of Etsy. I've sorted through there and gotten out all this stuff that I wanted to use. So now I'm just going to hot glue that onto the bones. So I'm gonna be putting them mostly on the ribs. I don't really think I'm gonna put them anywhere else, but I'm just gonna start gluing and playing, and we're gonna see how this evolves. And now our last step is to put everything together with a little bit of makeup. So before we do the grand reveal for this look, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it and it gave you a little bit of Halloween inspiration. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I post videos every single week. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle is So Far From Ordinary, just like my channel. So I hope to see you there, and I hope to see you on the next video. Bye.